Welcome to the ExecMBA podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, I'm excited to share a recent conversation with Lewis Chapman and Uma Subramani. Lewis and Uma are students in our working professional programs here at the Darden School of Business. Lewis is a part-time MBA student in our part-time MBA class of 2025. Uma is a second-year executive MBA student in our executive MBA class of 2024. They are also student leaders of the Healthcare Alliance that serves our part-time MBA and executive MBA students. I recently connected with them to talk more about their backgrounds, how they decided to pursue an MBA, how their experience has been at Darden thus far, what the Healthcare Alliance has been up to this year, and so much more. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. As always, if this conversation is helpful for you, please like this episode and subscribe to the ExecMBA podcast so you never miss an update. And remember, you can always check the episode description for links to Darden blogs, social channels, and more. Now, without further ado, here's my interview with Lewis Chapman and Uma Subramani. Lewis, Uma, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Brett. Great to be here.
Thanks, Brett. Yeah, really thrilled to be here. One of the first mediums that I'd engaged with Darden when I was considering my MBA originally was through this podcast, and I found it incredibly helpful to hear student perspectives and recent alumni perspectives. So I'm really happy to be here now and giving back for that.
Yeah, thanks, Lewis. I always appreciate it when it comes full circle when we have a former listener as a guest on the podcast. So, well, Lewis, let's start with you. How are things going? You are now fully in the elective period of the part-time MBA program. How are you doing?
Yeah, doing really well. Things have been exciting. A lot of movement lately. We finished up about 2 weeks ago the core curriculum of the inaugural part-time cohort. So we ended that with the residency in Charlottesville. So that was a really strong experience to be with the whole class in person down in Charlottesville for the week, not having work hanging over our heads and being able to really focus on the academics and getting to know each other. So that was awesome. And then on the work front, I just started a new rotational role about a week ago. So that aligns pretty well, actually, with my post-MBA career objectives. So I'm really excited for that opportunity and going to take a lot of time and commitment for the rest of this year, but it's what we're here for.
Well, that's great. Yeah, so much fun being down in Charlottesville with your class for R2, Residency 2, down in Charlottesville. King Family Vineyard, a big closing dinner there. It was quite a fun time. And it sounded like your class was doing a good job also getting out into Charlottesville and doing some things in addition to the classes and activities you had around Residency 2.
Oh, absolutely. We had a blast. I think we built quite a few social components into there. And as far as I know, everybody had an awesome experience. We're really energized coming back from that week.
Lewis, I mentioned that you're in the elective period now. This is new for our part-time MBA students. You're actually the first class, as you mentioned, and the first class to take electives in the part-time MBA program. We might have some listeners who are curious about what you're taking here in your first elective quarter. Would you mind sharing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually am, during the elective period, we have an option to also take classes that are through the executive curriculum. So I'm in one executive class and then one part-time class. Just a little bit of a difference in formatting. Part-time focused more on weeknights. Executive focused a little bit more on the intensive residency weekend once a month. So for the executive class, I'm in solutions in healthcare, which we're really, really enjoying. The professors had a long career in the consulting side of healthcare. And we've had some really powerful guest speakers coming in to talk about topics that are passionate to them. And we've had some really awesome class discussions there. And then on the part-time side, telling financial stories. It's kind of a cross between leadership communications and kind of how CFOs and investor relations might give good and bad news, quarterly updates and those kinds of things, and how to tell that message with the right framing. So really enjoying that. We're probably a little bit more than halfway through this quarter, I'd say.
All right. Well, thank you, Lewis. I thought we might have some listeners who wanted to hear a little bit more detail about the classes that you're taking. And I also think it's interesting that you're in an executive MBA elective. The calendars are aligned across our formats here at Darden. So in the elective period, there is this flexibility where students can take electives cross-program. To your point, though, provided you can make the schedule work as if you were a student in that program taking the elective. Well, Uma, here we are in quarter 10 of your program. You're at the very end. Can you believe you're almost done with your executive MBA?
Brett, I cannot believe it. I feel a little shell-shocked. I know way in the beginning you said it would go by fast, and it really, really has. We have our last OGR coming up And then a couple of weeks, we'll be doing the second residency and then graduation. I think we're just a little over 6.5 weeks away from graduation. So it's exciting.
Yeah, it's one of those times in the program, at least in my experience talking with students, is a little bittersweet, right? You have this, you're
Absolutely.
excited to have more time in your schedule. You're excited about all that you've accomplished, but also this is kind of your last time to be with this group of people in this kind of way. So a sentimental time as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I definitely have enjoyed interacting with people from so many different backgrounds and careers. And yeah, I'm definitely going to miss that.
Well, quarter 10 is also an elective quarter for you. What classes are you taking in this
Yeah, so
quarter?
actually, I'm in the Solutions in Healthcare with Lewis, which has been really fun, as he described. And it's been great to have students from the part-time program. Also taking the class that you mentioned with Yorgos, Financial Institutions and Markets, which has been quite relevant because we've covered a lot about the banking industry and why banks collapse. So that's been relevant. And then I've got Leading with Intention with Sean Martin, which has been fabulous. Um, so yeah, so great courses to round out things. And I'm actually still also completing a global client project, which has been a great experience with a project company based in Mexico.
Will you get to travel to Mexico for that global client project?
We did the travel in December. We were there for 3 days on the ground, and it's a healthcare company that's kind of disrupting healthcare in some of the big cities in Mexico. So it's been yeah, different experience. I've never been a consultant before, so it was an introduction to that, and I've had great teammates working on it with me. So it's been fun, and we're going to be wrapping that up also during the LR too.
All right. Well, we had Yorgos on office hours, I guess almost about a year ago, and he leads the financial institutions and markets class. And we were talking a lot about Silicon Valley Bank and First Republic and some of these banks that experienced that run and the collapse, and just how there's always new things being added to that course. There's always more to talk about. Unfortunately, I think in some ways, but it's a class that feels very of the moment. I think always, because that's Yorgos. He brings so much energy to it.
Exactly.
All right. Well, Emma, let's talk a little bit more about who you are and your background. So tell us your story.
So I'm a physician. I've spent my whole life in healthcare, and I trained in internal medicine and pediatrics, and I spent most of my time in both specialties. I started out in office-based practice and transitioned to hospital-based medicine about 16 years ago. Um, Initially in a community hospital, and then more recently in the DC area at NIH in the Department of Pediatrics. So I take care of pediatric patients that are under research protocols and need inpatient care. So it's been pretty exciting over the last few years, just working with a lot of renowned experts in cutting edge medicine.
How did you decide you wanted to pursue an MBA?
So it's interesting. About 10 years ago, the seed was planted, but at the time I thought, yeah, that's not something I can do. I can't go back to school. I'm too old. But it was the changes that I was seeing in the business side of medicine, the economic pressures on providers, the change in just the level of complexity of patients being admitted to the hospital. And just I thought the real need for healthcare managers that had direct healthcare experience. So either on the nursing side or the provider side. But I also reached a point over the more recent years where I was just feeling like I had plateaued. I wasn't really growing in my career or professionally in general. And I thought I needed a change and just wanted to explore other opportunities. And I thought the MBA would take me there.
Yeah, that feels very much aligned with the other comments that we hear in response to that question here on the podcast. A lot of this is about exploration and expanding what you can do, and having space to do that. 21 months of the program, in the case of the Executive MBA program, being surrounded by a group of people who are all asking those kinds of questions about who they are and where they'd like to go. Not so easy out there in the real world to find 120 or so people who are all aligned in this way, investing in themselves, interested in growing and learning more.
Yeah, it's very true. And I think one of the misconceptions I had was that everyone knew what they wanted to do when they came into the program. Everyone had a specific plan in mind or a direction they wanted to take the MBA, and it's not true. So that was somewhat refreshing. It's just everyone is sort of thinking about what else is out there, I think.
Yeah, we certainly ask in the application process, and we want to hear that you have goals in mind, short term and long term. But I think the advice that you'll hear from current students is to have that goal, but maybe hold it loosely and be open to discovery as you go through this experience. You're going to take classes that you've never taken before. You're going to be around people who do something very different than what you do. You never know where something might spark for you. So have some kind of North Star, something that's guiding you, but also be open as you go through this process. So, Lewis, how about you? Tell us your story.
Yeah, so I'm local to the area. I grew up in Maryland my whole life, and then I went to college and grad school in upstate New York at RPI, Rensselaer Polytechnic. So there I studied biomedical engineering, and I've always had a very STEM-heavy background. But towards the end of college, I started developing a passion for developing new medicines. I did a co-op at Regeneron Pharmaceuticals, working on bringing therapies to market, and really loved that. And since then, I've been working in the pharmaceutical space, specifically within research and development. So after my master's, I moved back to Maryland, DC. I've been working at AstraZeneca for the last 7 years and change, always in late stage development. So in my role at AstraZeneca, I'm an engineer who leads cross-functional matrix teams. So I've really been enjoying that role. I've been in it for about 2 years now, and it's a whole new set of experiences and kind of that team lead role, much less technical, much more soft skills, working with other people, but still, having to know your technical chops. So that's been a great experience for me. And then my team usually works on medicines towards the end of development, maybe phase 2 clinical studies through regulatory approval, and then we roll off very shortly after commercial launch.
And how did you decide you wanted to pursue an MBA?
So I always kind of had this as a long-term objective, but I didn't really put a lot of thought into it before COVID. I just knew that it would happen at some point. And then, maybe a year after COVID, around the second part of 2020, 2021, I had just gotten married. I realized that this was probably the right time to start thinking about it. I knew I did want to knock out the MBA before I started a family and had kids. So this was kind of the right timing for my life. And then I had applied in the spring of 2022, enrolled right at the end of that summer. And that's been going great experience so far. I loved my career and life in DC. I knew I didn't want to make a major change to that. And for that reason, when I was looking, I mostly was looking at executive programs, part-time programs, just because I knew that would best suit my life while also giving me the advancement and the career objectives that I was looking for.
Yeah, thank you for that. And you were part of the inaugural class of part-time MBA students, the Trailblazers, so to speak. We now have 2 classes, and we're recruiting the 3rd class of part-time MBA students now. What's it been like being part of that inaugural class?
It's been really excellent. I think people were maybe uncertain when they came in, but everybody, I think, has had a lot of enjoyment out of it. The people that want to take an active role in shaping what that program looks like in leadership opportunities to work with the administration and kind of fine-tune certain attributes of the program so that it works right for this evening format. They've had an opportunity to do that. I know our co-presidents, Max and Parker, have really gotten a lot of joy out of that in service for future cohorts to come. And then as far as kind of the academics, I think that was actually a well-oiled machine before we even came in. There's been very little uncertainty about that. I think there was so much kind of groundwork established through the executive programs that just went smoothly. Professors have been incredible. I think everyone's been blown away by that. So it's been a really excellent experience. I think it's been more positive for sure than average for being part of this inaugural cohort. And I think we've got a really good foundation now for future years. You mentioned you're recruiting class number 3 right now, so I'm sure that's a massive amount of work for you and your team, Brett.
It's great, though. The nice thing about our application processes for both of these programs is we have multiple deadlines. So there's 5 deadlines for the part-time MBA program. I think we have probably somewhere around 10 deadlines for the executive MBA program. Executive MBA is more of like a monthly deadline schedule. Part-time MBA is every couple of months. And so as we go from deadline to deadline, we meet a few more people and a few more people and a few more people. So by the time you get to June, July, you kind of have a sense of the full class. And so it's great to see the class come together. across these months, get to meet such interesting people, kind of really help them figure out, is Darden the right place for them? Can we help you get where you want to go? All these kinds of things. And so it's fun to be part of that process. Uma, how did you decide the executive MBA program and Darden was the right step for you?
I definitely knew that I couldn't stop working to attend a full-time MBA. So I definitely wanted something that would fit into my current life. Um, Initially, I really actually expected to do an online program. I thought, oh, online would be great. You can, do it from anywhere, anytime. It would fit perfectly with working full time. But then I really realized part of going back to school, I really was interested in interacting with people directly. And so the Darden program was the perfect blend, the executive program, rather, with one weekend a month in person and then online courses during the week. I thought it would really fit my schedule well, and it really did.
Yeah, the executive MBA program is a hybrid program consisting of in-person and virtual elements, 2/3 in person, 1/3 online, so majority in person. And the part-time MBA, some similar kind of structure in terms of the portioning of in-person to virtual. It's about 60% in person, 40% online. As Lewis shared earlier, it's more structured around evening, weeknight classes, whereas the executive MBA program, the core of the schedule is these weekend residencies, on average 1 weekend per month, with online class typically a couple nights per week. So let's talk a little bit more about your respective experiences in your programs. Lewis, you kind of already touched on this a bit, but Uma, I want to come to you and just ask you about the adjustment process to being a new executive MBA student. If you can remember back to that first semester of your first year, what was the adjustment process like?
Way back then, well, I had not been in school for many, many, many years, longer than most of my colleagues. But yeah, I think the biggest thing is really time management and understanding how much reading you have to do and how you really have to make time for that, schedule that into your new schedule rather. But it does go by fast. I would say that was the thing. You're just really going through these heavy courses and you finish one and you start the next one and you just keep going. And it's all kind of trial by fire a little bit, or a water hose, where you're learning so much great information. I think that that's makes it exciting and fast paced and challenging at the same time. But I'd also gone through medical school, so I had been in that kind of element before. So for me, maybe it was a little bit different than some of my friends, but um, I think it's just if you have a joy of learning, you're going to enjoy the program. And yes, there is an adjustment to making it fit into your life and not having as much spare time. But the reward you get from learning and engaging with different people, I think, makes up for it. And it does, again, it does go by so quickly that you can do it.
Yeah, I appreciate that point about getting back into school mode. I think that's for most of our students, full-time MBA included, but that's certainly for our working professional students or executive MBA students who tend to be a little bit further along in their careers when they take the step. Yeah, getting back into school mode, having homework again, having to take exams again, your time not being kind of exclusively your own after you get done with work, having to find time to study, learning team meetings, all these kinds of things. How did you figure out a schedule that worked well for you?
Oh, that's a good question. How did I? I think it was a matter of really, first of all, when you're starting out, you're really tight with your learning team. And you really, as a group, you make a schedule and you figure out which classes need more preparation for and how you can meet and sort of combine your resource in the sense that everyone has different strengths. And so the tougher cases for one member or two members in the group might be very easy for other members. So you kind of balance out your strengths and weaknesses and prepare, really prepare for the weeknight courses as well as the OGRs, where you're going to have a lot more to cover. But yeah, we created kind of weekly meetings, a schedule that way, and yeah, that carried us through definitely all of the core and a little bit into the electives. And then during the electives, everyone sort of breaks off into their own sort of style and schedule.
Yeah, I think it's a process to kind of figure out what works best. And you're right. Typically, people become more scheduled, more structured as they go through these programs. You probably end up putting more things on the calendar than you did previously, blocking out time for school, blocking out maybe personal commitments as well, just so the other people in your life know you've arranged for that, and your learning team can know, hey, I can't meet on this day or that day because I have these other things going on. I think it's the hardest thing when we talk with prospective students to help people understand how they can make all of this work, because you know your life and it feels very full. And it's like, how am I supposed to find 15 hours or so per week for school related activities? But it happens. Your life conforms to school.
It's true. It's true. You suddenly have an understanding of where you waste time. So you become much more efficient in managing it. And definitely everyone has personal events, things that do have to take a priority over school at some point in the program. And everyone makes allowances for that, whether it's within your learning team or your professors even. So everyone knows life goes on, and you can find the balance.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that's the other thing that's important to keep in mind. School may not always be your number one priority as you go through these programs. It may shift around a little bit. Work may have to be the number one priority in some weeks. Other times, personal commitments may have to be the number one priority. That's why you have a learning team. That's why you have classmates to lean on. No one is doing this by themselves. This is not a solitary endeavor. And I think it's important to understand and appreciate that, and also accept the fact that, like, people are going to help you and you're going to help others. And it's very much that two-way street. So, Lewis, obviously you're through the 18 months of the core curriculum in the part-time MBA program. You in the elective period. It's electives from here on out. But can you remember that first semester, what the adjustment process was like for you?
Yeah, I think everyone in the class had a pretty intense first semester. So that first quarter and second quarter from fall through Christmas the first year, that's very much an adjustment period where you're trying to figure out the right level of preparation for cases, because that's a really new experience for everybody. And I know we'll talk about that more. But you're trying to gauge, the level of preparation that you need to put into that, probably in a new subject for you. What trade-offs you're kind of willing to make in your life. So that's like a personal choice that everyone has to make, and you're starting to come to terms with that. But I think after the first semester, most people do kind of get it into their own routine. And I think the pacing of the part-time program is actually designed really well. So it's 2 classes continuing to go, and then you'll do 2 quarters per semester. So it ends up being 4 classes a semester. And I think that pacing is right. So now that we have wrapped up the core, we do have the option to either speed that up and slow it down. And there are quite a few people speeding that up and doing 3 classes per quarter. And I think that would definitely be a bit much for me. So I'm going to stick with the 2 classes, and kind of that'll take me how long it takes me. But I think really it's just about, for me, identifying the trade-offs that you're going to make for classes that you might have a stronger background in already. So for me, that was the more quantitative classes. I prepared like the baseline for the class, so I could have a good discussion and work through the pre-questions. But then for some of the classes that were a lot more, novel concepts to me, that's when I went a little bit extra effort in and spent more time talking about that with my learning team. So you can kind of fine tune that based on the material and what you personally need to get out of it. So yeah, it's not unmanageable, right? So it's something that everyone has to decide for themselves where they're going to take time from. But it's been a good experience for everybody, and it's busy, but in a good way.
Yeah, I appreciate the note. Part-time MBA students typically taking about 2 classes per quarter. You'll take classes in these 2-month quarters. 2 quarters equals a semester, if you're curious about this at Darden. So you get new classes every couple months. The executive MBA students typically take about 3 classes at a time, and the executive MBA program at its sort of standard pacing is about a year faster than the standard pacing of the part-time MBA, 21 months versus 33 months in the case of our part-time MBA program. To Lewis's point, though, you can speed it up. The part-time MBA experience, the fastest you can complete the part-time MBA program is 28 months, so about 2.5 years if you want to go a little bit more quickly through those remaining elective credits. If you're curious, we can get really into the details here. In the part-time MBA program, it's 34.5 credits through the core, and then 25.5 credits as you work towards the 60 required for graduation in that elective period. That tends to work out to about 17 electives. And there's an opportunity or two during the core to earn some elective credit in the part-time MBA program. There's a January term, You can participate in a global elective in the fall of your second year, but by and large, most of the electives that you're taking are during that period after the core. Anything else you'd add to that, Lewis?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think the options available for the folks that did want to speed it up, I think they've been really pleased with those options. So just to kind of hit on a couple things that, so you'd already mentioned the global residency J term. Those are awesome. I did a J term and really enjoyed it. And then additionally from that, we have students that have been working with professors on case writing in an industry or topic that interested them. So that's something that's available. We've had several people doing independent studies with a professor that they really connected with during the core. And even a couple people have gotten together and done an independent study, like 4 or 5 people under one professor. So they did have a little bit more structure to it. It wasn't just one-on-one. And I know they've gotten a lot out of that. So the options for adding in some of those electives that are not just the traditional class, I think have been really strong. And I know our class has been very pleased with that.
And Uma, I want to come to you to talk a little bit about the pacing for the executive MBA students. So something I hear pretty regularly from executive MBA students is that they like that it's defined start and end. Very full lives for the people who are doing this program. A lot going on. They have families, other commitments, they're sort of competing for their time. And so the first year is core, the second year is electives, and you're done in 21 months. Anything you would want to add?
Just that I think, at least during the electives, you do have a great opportunity to balance out your schedule a little bit more. And if you know that you have either work or life obligations that are going to be heavier in one quarter, you can lighten your load in that quarter and maybe take an extra course in another quarter. And as Lewis just mentioned, the J term is an absolutely great opportunity to sneak an extra credit and a half in a very short period of time. And then there are some online electives. So if taking one of those actually can give you a day off during the OGR, I know several people that have been able to do that and then didn't have their whole Friday off or their Saturday and Sunday afternoons off. So that makes a huge difference, especially at the stage of the program. So yeah, I think you kind of suffer the first 7 quarters and then you get to relax a little bit and have a little bit of breathing space. That's how I felt.
Yeah, it's a full schedule for sure during that core. So quarters 1 through 6 core, and then when you get to the fall of your second year, you start taking electives. And to Uma's point, it may not be entirely obvious to folks who are just learning about the executive MBA program, but when you take electives, there are some electives that are offered on Fridays, and there's some electives that meet on Saturdays and Sundays. So you can, choose to take electives that only meet on Saturday and Sunday, for example, or you could be ahead in your credits, maybe by virtue of doing an additional global residency, a January term, a short 10-day term in January between the fall and spring semester, do a short J term elective to get you ahead on your credits. Maybe you're doing an asynchronous elective. Lewis had mentioned that there's some of these asynchronous electives. They are also open to executive MBA students and part of the elective offerings for executive MBA students. So you can lighten your load in different kinds of ways, maybe be ahead on your credits in the executive MBA program and have a little bit more flexibility during that elective period than maybe people initially think when you hear cohort-based lockstep program. The first year of the executive MBA program certainly very set for the students. But some opportunities for electives as you go along. As I've mentioned, the J term, additional global residencies beyond one global residency also count towards the credit total and effectively can take the place of an elective. Anything else you'd add, Uma?
Just that as you were speaking, I was thinking about it. It is the transition to electives is a little bittersweet because you stop meeting as a full cohort. And so you don't see people as often necessarily. If you're not taking the same electives or someone has the weekend afternoons off, you're not going to see as many of your fellow students. So that's a change.
All right. Well, let's talk a little bit more about the healthcare organization you both are part of the leadership for. So Uma, can you tell us a little bit more about this group? It's had different names. It was originally, I think, the Executive Healthcare Alliance. I think it's going through a rebrand right now. Do you want to tell us what this organization is and what it's all about?
Yeah, so it has gone through a few different names. I'm not sure where we are right now as I head off into the sunset, but yeah, it's really just a group of like-minded people, students from very different backgrounds, but all related to healthcare or completely different backgrounds, but they're students that are interested in the healthcare, and that can include very different areas. It can be pharmaceuticals, payer side, um, biomedical devices. What am I missing? I'm missing a few things. But I think different years have approached the club differently. And Lewis and I have been focused this past year on trying to give people an opportunity to learn about different areas of healthcare and career prospects that they may not have already known about.
All right, Lewis, anything you would add to Uma's description there?
Yeah, I'll just add maybe that I was really excited to kind of have an opportunity to have this healthcare club in the professional cohorts, because when many people think about getting an MBA, you're thinking about things like consulting and finance. So I was uncertain at first, like how many like-minded and like industry folks I'd come across. And so I was really reassured. I think getting in, there's a good chunk of my class, probably 8 or 9 out of the 60 of us that work in healthcare. A lot of people doing consulting, but specifically for healthcare clients. We have people that work in the startup space in medical devices. We have people that are one practitioner. So we've got a really good mix here, and I was really excited to kind of have that element still in the MBA. And yeah, to Uma's point, I think we've been focused this year more on doing some discussion panels, kind of career oriented. So we had somebody who's our executive in residence at Darden and has had a really successful career working amongst different pharmacy related aspects of the healthcare industry, come in and give a talk, kind of thinking back about her career journey and advice to us. So that was about a month ago. That was really valuable. Just last night, actually, we had a career panel for 3 people. One Darden executive MBA alum who works in biopharma, somebody who's very early in the VC space, and then someone who's later in the VC space, almost private equity, growth equity sort of space, coming in and talking about the opportunities that they see in the industry for MBAs to come in and make a difference in their industry or even their company, where they see the trends going. And so I think we had a good turnout from that. So it is a smaller group of people that are really interested in healthcare, or maybe want to transition into it. But I think within that group, it's people that are kind of committed to the mission of making the world a healthier place. And there's many different ways you can do that, regardless of what your background was pre-MBA. So but definitely some growing to do and trying to get some more events scheduled for the rest of this year, but it's been a good experience.
Yeah, Uma, we get asked all the time by prospective students about the network of healthcare practitioners or people who are interested in healthcare at Darden. What would you share with prospective students about this group, inclusive of alumni, certainly?
Well, I think on the surface, people might think that Darden doesn't necessarily have some sort of healthcare track, but in reality, I would say almost in every course if there is or are cases that relate to healthcare in one way or another. So you get that exposure there. And then definitely there is an extensive network with current students and alumni that are from all different aspects, again, of healthcare and working in different industries. So the network is there and really strong. I would say, just in my limited experience, there is the Darden family, and people are really ready to help you explore opportunities or learn about industries. And the same just goes within our cohort. People that are in healthcare are really willing to share what they know and their experiences and exchange knowledge that way.
Louis, anything you'd want to add here?
I definitely want to echo and reiterate Uma's point. I hadn't thought of it that way, but in each class, there's about 14 lectures per quarter. And for the vast majority, if not all of the classes, we've had at least one healthcare case. And it's been through the lens of that class, right? So if it's a financial accounting class, you're looking at something maybe on the balance sheet or a problem related to that concept of the day, but it's still learning about and kind of reading about the background of the industry and the company. So that's actually been something that I've never looked in. A very good point. You very much get a breadth, I think, of exposure through the case methods, and I know we'll talk about that soon.
Yeah, that's sort of a natural segue. So most people don't know a ton about the case method. It doesn't really reveal itself based upon the name. And I always worry if we say, oh, we're a case method school, it only, like, again, people are like, I don't know what that is. Tell me more about that. And so you both have referenced reading healthcare cases in your classes. And so how would you explain the case method, Lewis, to someone who doesn't know a ton about this pedagogy?
Yeah. So to be really blunt, this was the aspect of Darden that I really liked at the beginning, and this is what drew me to Darden. And to explain what it is, it's each class is taught through the concept of, or maybe through the lens of a case study for that day. So a case can be anywhere from 5 to 15 pages, depending on how detailed it is and what kind of exhibits are included. But you're reading about a specific protagonist for a company in an industry and a problem they're facing. And so there will be a couple of pages of background on the company to give you that perspective and that exposure as, somebody learning about different businesses in their MBA program. And then there will be a couple of pages talking about the industry and the different complexities and incentives that might be present in that industry that are generally related to the protagonist's dilemma or question they're trying to make or business decision they're trying to make. And then there's a couple pages of discussion about exactly what that dilemma is or what decision's trying to be made. And then in the appendices or the exhibits at the end, there's various financial data or maybe qualitative data or just explanations that go into a lot more detail that are kind of relevant. And then, so that's the case itself. So for that day, you might have a specific concept in class you're trying to learn, and the case is a way to put that within the context of an actual business and a choice that we might make as future managers. And it's so much more involved than just having like a lecture discussion. And that's really what I've enjoyed. And then maybe last point I'll add about just what the case method is. There'll be 4 or 5 questions that are like preparation for the class. So once you read the case, you kind of think about those questions, and that'll help give you some context clues to where the discussion is going to go for that day. And that's what it is. So as I mentioned, that was the thing that drew me to Darden. Looking back on that, I'm really happy with that. These experiences we've had through the cases definitely wouldn't have changed my decision. And I would encourage anybody who's listening to this now that might be still uncertain about what case methods are or how that might impact your MBA experience. Definitely sit in on a class. I know I had done that, and I believe it's still an option to the listeners, but that really helps me understand what it's like. And kind of one of the big takeaways that I got from that when I sat in on the class was that in the part-time cohort, we've talked about how it's evenings usually. So when you're sitting kind of tired from work, it's been a long day, you have a lot going on, it's 8:30 or 9 o'clock at night, do you want to be listening to like a lecture and slides, or you really want to be engaging and discussing with your classmates and with the professor? So I think that fits super well actually with the evening format, because it really does keep you engaged. You're excited to be there. I know the class has a lot of energy, and it really just keeps everybody engaged in a way that I think is most conducive to the MBA learning experience.
Yeah, all great points. I would encourage folks to join us for a class visit, or in the summer, we typically have in-person mock classes. So we have plans for one in May and working to finalize a date for one in June. Those will both be here in Roslyn. So come by, participate in a case discussion. If you come for a class visit, it's just an observation. So yes, you can see what it's like and kind of get a pulse for what the classroom experience is. But if you want to actually participate in a case yourself, join us for either a virtual mock class or an in-person mock class where you actually get to participate in a case discussion. Uma, how do you explain the case method when you have folks ask you about what you do at Darden from an academic experience? How do you explain this learning experience?
Yeah, I think Lewis really covered it quite well. I would just add, it's not a didactic session. I think early on, some students really felt like, they just wanted to hear information, expected a lecture, and it's completely not that. I think it really teaches you to think on your feet, and you definitely stay engaged. And I think the other big thing is when you walk away from the course, you remember the learning concepts, the learning material based on the recall of that case, that situation. And so there's a lot of just practical application and easier to recall. And it is more interesting. You see sort of concepts come to life. But there's a lot of reading.
Yeah, I think the thing to know about that reading, I think sometimes people hear that, gosh, they're not going to read a lot. You get a lot better at the reading as you go along. I think, like any kind of school you've ever had, you're learning skills, you're learning how to unpack information, and you start to develop a pretty quick filter for, all right, what's this case about? Why are we reading this particular case? How does it fit into the syllabus here? And Lewis mentioned the 14 class sessions in each course. There's typically a topic associated with each class session. There may be questions or something that you're encouraged to think about as you're reading through the case. And so as you go through the program, by the time you get a year in, even a semester in, you're going to get much better at the reading. Did that align with your experience?
Definitely. I didn't want to make it sound that it's just a lot of heavy reading. You definitely learn to parse through what's important. And I think the key is really that when you're out in the real world, you're going to have to process a lot of information, and oftentimes without a lot of time or a lot of warning. So that is the skill that you're gaining as you go through the readings. Yeah, totally agree with that.
Lewis,
Yeah.
Have you found that to be your experience as well?
Definitely a skill, and I hope I didn't make it sound too reading intensive, because I didn't intend that. That's not what I meant. But it shouldn't take you that long to read the case, and it is very, I think, reflective of actual business decisions where there is a lot of information. You have to quickly look at it and understand what's relevant and important, and then maybe spend more time on just what's relevant and important. But it definitely shouldn't take very long to prepare the cases. And kind of the trade-off there is, instead of having a bunch of different like assignments or problem sets that you might have in a more traditional MBA class, a lot of the homework actually is doing the case preparation. So where you're maybe spending a little more time reading the case or doing some Excel analysis yourself, it's time you're not spending on some other assignment that a different sort of program format might have. And I'll maybe add one more reflection on the case method and why I've found it so impactful and enjoyable. I've hinted to this throughout the discussion, but I have a very STEM-heavy background. And in college, I knew mostly engineers. Even in my work in my department of 100 or so people, it's mostly engineers. And then even on the cross-functional teams we work on, cross-functional engineers, right? So that's what I knew. And when I was coming into the MBA program and experience, I knew that I wanted to get a lot of breadth, obviously away from engineering, but just to understand how different people think. And like the case method has very much enabled that for me to better understand the business side, even of my own industry. But it's actively hearing perspectives of people that work in finance or work in consulting or consumer goods, whatever it might be. But hearing their perspective on the problem that the case protagonist is facing has really been, I think, elucidating for me. And I think I had high expectations for it coming in, and it's definitely surpassed those expectations. I've been really pleased with it.
Well, thank you, Lewis and Uma, for your insights about the case method. It's just helpful to demystify the experience. But again, just want to underscore: come for a class visit, come for a mock class, just to experience it firsthand. I think that's as illustrative as anything. Lewis, what are you looking forward to in the coming months? Anything that you have circled on your calendar? Anything you're excited about?
Yeah, well, I guess foremost, I'm excited to finally be getting into summer weather. So starting to get warm out here in the DC area. So I'm looking forward to that. And I mentioned at the very beginning of our conversation, I just started a rotation last week within my company. So I'll be working in business development from last week through the end of the year. So I'm really excited to get exposure into that part of my organization. That was one of the kind of leading opportunities that I had in mind when I was looking at an MBA. So I'm excited to understand more about what that day-to-day looks like and see if that's something that my skills fit well into, and if it's something I'd like to do for the next 5-10 years of my life. So yeah, really looking forward to that.
Uma, how about for you? What are you looking forward to?
Well, I made the mistake of getting a new puppy a few weeks ago. So I'm looking forward to having extra time to train this puppy. I'm definitely looking forward to LR2 and having more time with some fellow students and enjoying Charlottesville. And definitely graduation is around the corner. I may be doing some traveling this summer. I'm hoping to have an opportunity to go on a medical mission trip to Cambodia. And if that happens, I'd really like to visit Vietnam. I didn't get to do the global residency in Vietnam that just took place a few weeks ago. So some sort of international travel I hope to do.
Where did you go on your global residency?
I went to Finland and Estonia. I always forget to add Estonia, but Helsinki and Tallinn, Estonia.
Did you
It's
enjoy that?
wonderful. Loved it. Loved it. Yeah, I had a great time. I was thinking about sort of memorable experiences, and it was really the first day in Helsinki. We got to experience the true Finnish sauna and had a wonderful dinner. And before that, took a dip in the Baltic, a few dips in the cold Baltic Sea. So it was really fun. It's just really, yeah, joyful time.
As I understand it, you go to the sauna, you then get into the Baltic, you go back into the sauna, you get into the Baltic Sea. This is the experience.
You got it. You got it. Yeah.
Sounds nice. Honestly, I mean, in case people are wondering, global residency is a credit course. So it's not all saunas and swimming in the Baltic Sea, but there are some cultural experiences, mostly company visits. Any highlights from the companies you visited?
Oh, we had a variety of different companies. I think each one was unique. I will just say overall, all of the companies impressed me in that they really seem to have an ESG perspective. I think how Finland probably especially just really concerned about the environment. But we visited a lot of different companies just in different industries. Yeah.
One of the things that folks who've gone on that Finland, Estonia global residency have shared with me is they remarked upon the culture at some of these companies. It's like there's like a dedicated time for lunch, and everybody will go to the lunchroom together. Even the leadership of the company, everybody will be there together having lunch. Very different than you're American. I'm probably eating lunch at my desk, maybe skipping lunch altogether, sort of stratification of worker hierarchy and roles. It's very different culturally. That's what has been shared with me. It certainly made an impression on folks.
Yeah, I would say so. I think they have just a holistic view of life, and work is part of life. And with work, you still should be able to interact with people, take time for lunch, take time for health and wellness. Um, the interiors of a lot of these corporations, they had brought nature into the buildings. I thought that was fascinating, just to make it a more sort of pleasing working environment. And definitely a culture of camaraderie and being able to approach your senior executives. I think that was universal. So interesting.
Louis, do you have a favorite memory from the part-time program?
Yeah, I've got, I think, many very positive memories, but one that sticks out more than the rest during residency one, which is what kicks off the program. So it's 1 week intensive in Charlottesville. You take off work, so you're fully immersed in getting to know everybody. But we had a session, I believe it was called Darden Stories or something to that effect, but it was rather short, maybe 45 minutes or an hour. But it was an open mic sort of format where folks were able to share in like a closed door setting, a really impactful experience that they'd had in their lives. And at first, I think maybe we all were a little uncertain of it. We weren't sure how serious it would be, or if it would be a little cheesy, or if people were really going to share. But very quickly, everyone, I think, really enjoyed it, because the folks that shared something about themselves, it really helped more than I could have ever foreseen, really like start to kind of instill some of that bonding and camaraderie amongst our class. And that was just a really great experience. I think that as I progress in my career journey and move into more leadership roles, I'll keep that sort of experience and setting in the back of my mind as a way to really bring people together. And that, I think, happened one of the final days of our residency, but it really kicked off the tone for the program, and it was just a immensely positive experience.
Yeah, there's set times throughout the program. I think particularly during that first week, and then also typically during the second week long residency, where there's a time to kind of reflect and take stock and be vulnerable with your classmates, share things about your story. Uma has this to look forward to as part of LR2 down in Charlottesville. I think y'all also had a time for reflections during R2, Lewis, if I judged the schedule correctly. But it's nice to get up in front of people, and it may sound a little scary, but it's one of the more powerful experiences that I've had at Darden, being able to sit in those sessions and hear people say, this is who I was before I did this program. Here are all the things I was concerned about. This is what happened to me while I was in this program, challenges that they've had personally, professionally, and just remark upon the journey that they've been on. That is always impressive.
Absolutely. The reflections in residency too were very very positive as well. That was I think for us at least more about talking about how we've changed as individuals throughout the last year and a half, or close to 2 years, and how we've seen other people change. And I think it really helped kind of folks eliminate a little bit of some of the imposter syndrome that they might have, and just gave us a lot of, I think, momentum coming out of that experience.
Well, Uma, I'm curious, do you have a piece of advice for our prospective student listeners, something you would encourage them to think about as they go forward on their own MBA journeys?
Well, I think, I would say don't hesitate. If you are thinking about it and you have good reasoning to do it, just do it. It's a great experience wherever you come, but I would say come to Darden because I think it is a unique program, and there's true camaraderie, true sort of family spirit, and world-class professors. I would say in all of my years of education, I've had some of the best professors in this course, and they really would highlight that. And I would say, yeah, take the plunge, commit. You won't be sorry.
Lewis, how about for you? Piece of advice for our listeners?
Yeah, I would say definitely be really thoughtful and purposeful about when you do it, and I think make it for the right reasons and the right time, which is going to be different for everyone because it is a different, deeply personal decision. Whether you're thinking about a full-time or part-time or executive format, you're having some combination of taking off work or taking on a major new piece of effort in your life for a couple of years. There's a large expense associated with it. So be really purposeful with, I think, what you would like to put into it and get out of it. And so you can kind of have that in mind as, I think, Brett, as you said earlier on, but like your North Star, like how do you want to grow specifically? Like make sure you put thought into that. And you're going to have to do it anyway as part of your essay and application. So start thinking about that. And I think I've gotten a lot from having more in person than not. So I definitely encourage folks to pick a format that has the right amount of in-person interaction for you, because it really does improve the learning experience and the amount of collaboration you'll have with your peers.
Yeah, I appreciate that point. Uma mentioned fully online programs, which can be the right fit for someone. But I think for the students who choose these programs, they are attracted to the programs because they're majority in person. There's a lot of social connectivity that happens in and out of the classroom. And we talked about the case method. The reality is you're learning a lot about your classmates as you're learning about things like accounting, finance, marketing, operations, et cetera. As you go through these classes, you're hearing about people's perspectives, experiences, things that they've seen and done over the course of their career. I think, Lois, you mentioned earlier, sort of getting outside of your industry experience, hearing from other people's experiences. It's absolutely part of this. And so we kind of the relationships with your classmates actually begin in the class in many ways. So I want to thank both of you for your time. Good luck with the Healthcare Alliance in the coming months. I know y'all are in a period of sort of reactivation, trying to get a few more things on the books, events, programming scheduled. Exciting to have that organization be active, though. We get so many prospective students who are curious about the healthcare community, opportunities for folks who are interested in healthcare, who are looking at these programs. So thank you both for the work that you're doing.
Thanks, Brett, for having us.
Absolutely. This was a great conversation. Thanks, Brett. Thanks, Uma.
And that was my conversation with Lewis Chapman and Uma Subramanian, two student leaders in our Healthcare Alliance student organization serving our part-time MBA and executive MBA students. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at exec, that's EXEC, MBA at Darden, Virginia.edu. Until next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.